Hello and a very warm welcome to my YouTube this evening. Well, I was criticised quite strongly for mispronouncing the Hamilcar when in fact it should have been Hamilcar. And somebody remarked about the size of the Hamilcar and how enormous it was, but only was it dwarfed by the German-made Messerschmitt 323, which was the Gigant. The 323 was the result of a 1940 German requirement for a large assault glider in preparation for Operation Sea Lion. Operation Sea Lion was the planned invasion of Great Britain. The Germans had used the DFS-230 light glider, which had proven its worth in the Battle of Fort Eben-Emael in Belgium, the first ever assault by glider-borne troops, and would later be used successfully in the invasion of Crete in 1941. In order to mount an invasion across the English Channel, the Germans would need to be able to, as part of the initial assault wave. Although Operation Sea Lion was cancelled, the requirement for a heavy air transport capability still existed. With the cancellation of Operation Sea Lion, the focus now shifted to the forthcoming Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. On the 18th of October 1940, Junkers and Messerschmitt were given just 14 days to submit a proposal for a large transport glider. The emphasis was still very much on the assault role. The ambitious requirement was to be able to carry either an 88mm gun and its half-track tractor, or a Panzer IV medium tank. The Messerschmitt design, which was accepted as a glider design, was configured and named as the Messerschmitt 321, which was a glider version of what was to become. As a transport, it was never used for its intended role as an assault glider. Early in 1941, as a result of the feedback from Transport Command pilots in Russia, the decision was taken to produce a motorized variant of the ME-321, and this was to be designated the ME-323. It was decided to use the French Gnome Aeron GR14N radial engines, rated at 1,160 horsepower each, for takeoff as used in the Bloch MB-175 aircraft using French engines. This was thought to place no extra burden on Germany's already overstrained industry. These were conducted using 4 Gnome engines attached to a strengthened ME-321 wing, which gave a modest speed of around about 130 miles an hour. This was slower than the Ju-52 transport aircraft. A fixed undercarriage was fitted, which comprised of 4 small wheels in a bogie at the front of the aircraft, with 6 larger wheels in 2 lines at 3 each side of the fuselage, partly covered by an aerodynamic fairing. The rear wheels were fitted with pneumatic brakes and could stop the aircraft within around about 200 metres, 660 feet. The 4-engined ME-323C was considered merely a stepping stone to the 6-engined D series. It still required an extremely and highly dangerous style of takeoff, where they used a formation of 3 Messerschmitt Bf 110 heavy fighters and an underwing mounted Walter HWK 109-500 rocket, which assisted the takeoff to get the unit airborne when fully loaded, but it could return to base under its own power when empty. This was clearly not much better than the ME-321 glider, so the V2 prototype became the first to have 6 engines and flew for the first time in early 1942, becoming the prototype for the D-series aircraft. The selection of 6 engines and their specific placement on the wings. They were fitted to reduce torque. 3 counterclockwise rotating engines were mounted on the port wing, and 3 clockwise rotating engines were mounted on the starboard wing. As with the ME-321, the ME-323 had a massive semi-cantilever high-mounted wing, which were braced from the fuselage out to the middle of the wing. To reduce weight and to save on aluminium, much of the wing was made of plywood and fabric, while the fuselage was of a metal tube construction with wooden spars and covered with doped fabric, with heavy bracing in the floor to support the payload. The D-series had a crew of 5, 2 pilots, 2 flight engineers and a radio operator. 2 gunners could also be carried. The flight engineers occupied 2 small cabins, one in each wing, between the inboard and centre engines. The engineers were intended to monitor engine synchronization and allow the pilot to fly without worrying about engine status, although the pilot could override the engineer's decisions on engine and propeller control. Maximum payload was around 12 tons, although at that weight the aircraft needed the assistance of the rocket-assisted system used on the Me-321 glider for takeoff. There were fitted 8 rockets in total, 4 under each wing outboard of the outer engines, which were used and needed to get the aircraft off the ground when it was at its maximum all-up weight. Cargo hold on the Me-323 was 11 metres long, that's 36 feet, 3 metres wide, that's 10 feet, and 3.4 metres high, that's 11 feet. 130 men or 60 stretchers. Some Me-321 gliders were converted to the Me-323, but the majority were built as 6-engined aircraft from the beginning. Early models were fitted with wooden 2-bladed propellers, which were later replaced by metal 3-bladed variable pitch versions. The Me-323 had a maximum speed of 136 miles an hour at sea level, and speed dropped very much so with altitude. For defence's armament, it was armed with 5 13mm MG-131 machine guns firing from a dorsal position behind the wings, and from the fuselage they were manned by the extra gunners, radio operator and engineers. By September 1942, Me-323s were being delivered for use in the Tunisian campaign and entered service in the Mediterranean theatre in November 1942. The high rate of loss amongst Axis shipping had made it necessary for a huge airlift of equipment across the Mediterranean to keep Rommel's Africa Corps supplied. On the 22nd of April 1943, a formation of 27 fully loaded Me-323s were being escorted across the Sicilian Straits by Bf 109s of JG-27 when they were intercepted by 7 squadrons of Spitfires and P-40s. Of the 27 transport aircraft, only 6 reached their destination. The remaining 21 of the Me-323s were lost, while 3 of the P-40s were shot down. A total of 198 Me-323s were built before production ceased in April 1944. There were several production versions that began with the D1, later the D and the E versions. They differed in the choice of power plant and in defensive armament, with improvements in structural strength, total cargo load and fuel capacity, which were also implemented. Nonetheless, the Me-323 remained significantly underpowered. There were proposals to install 6 BMW 801 radials, but this never came to pass. The Me-323 was also a short-range aircraft with a typical range of around about 1,000 to 1,200 kilometers, which is 620 to 750 miles. Despite this, the limited numbers of Me-323s in service were an asset to the Germans and saw extensive use. In 1943, while it was en route from Sardinia to Pistoia in Italy. This is the only known wreck of a Messerschmitt 323 Gigant that was lost back in 1943, and it has lain on the seabed of the Mediterranean for over 70 years now, and only discovered very, very recently. Yes, it was a sad day, April the 22nd, 1943. 16 Me-323 aircraft were flying over Cape Bon, Tunisia. They were intercepted by 2 RAF fighter squadrons and 4 South African squadrons with Kittyhawks. 14 of the 16 Me-323s were shot down. They were filled with 240 tons of fuel for the Africa Corps. Out of the 140 crew, 19 survived. 4 days earlier, the Luftwaffe lost 24 Ju-52s as well. I really hope you enjoyed that short film about this amazingly large aircraft. Some might say it was rather a monster machine. Very vulnerable, could carry massive loads, but equally it became very vulnerable to enemy attack. Please take the greatest of care. I really hope you did find this film interesting, and have a ponder about subscribing to my channel. That would be really very much appreciated. I wish you all the very best. Cheers for now.